thought Mr. Averson was coming in a month ago. Unfortunately, that has not occurred. There have been phone calls out from various contacts made, but it only resulted in coming a week ago. So that was not without attempt to have that happen.
I don't know. Did the task force come to any kind of resolution of what should go forth with the old stone house? Assuming that we didn't do any more stabilization other than we've already committed to, did they come forth with anything about whether they should? I mean, I thought I read somewhere in the minutes talk about selling it or a museum curator. Was there any resolution reached at that point, or is this just like putting off that decision based on this decision?
No, the task force had come to. We were actually working on the draft report. That draft report was going to give you a list of options which we were looking at. We felt that we weren't going to be the ones to make the decision. What we wanted to do was present you with a series of options. Right. Those options would be included how to use it for public use, for private use, the potential that if none of those uses could work, that there may be a process to look at what to do with it if it meant you can't do anything with the building, how to deregister it, if that was an option.
There was no favorite option, though, among the group?
There was. I mean, several weeks ago, I was not at the last meeting, but several weeks ago, there was a consensus to basically sell or convey the property to another party because we just felt it was way too big of a project for the village to take on, and to find out if there's someone willing to take this property off our hands and to move forward, potentially restoring it, but not at the village expense. That was a consensus we had a couple weeks ago. I missed the last meeting, so I don't know what the direction it goes.
We should spend any more money.
Were you at the last meeting?
Yes, I was.
Since he wasn't at the last meeting.
And what happened is that we got to the point of having a discussion that we felt that we should present the options, and we're setting up people to write those various options, and that yes, there may be one or two that we felt might be a little bit stronger, but the idea was to present it with information based upon what the benefits were of selling it, if that was one of the ideas, what the benefits might be of keeping it, whether that was for public use or private use. There are pros, don't want to say necessarily pros and cons, but there are issues that may be generated by each of those. There might be benefits generated by each of those.
Does the money that you have for the stabilization allow you to use it for other purposes like a re-estimate? I mean, are there some constraints sometimes when there are certain funds they're tied to specific activities or tasks? And also, is there a budget? You know, if it comes in beyond, what you have available, if you can transfer those funds to do an estimate, what happens if the estimate cost is greater than the funds you have available?
Do we have funds available? I don't know.
No. A couple of points. I think one, the roof has been stabilized. We have put a new roof on it. And I think 4 months ago we had Aberson in a meeting, and in fact he did a analysis of the needs for stabilizing the facility, and he actually asked for some more money at that time, in which we authorized an additional funds for some additional stabilization to go forward. So there was an evaluation that was done at least 4 months ago. Am I correct? And that's why we formed the task force, to come to closure on what we needed to do. The other portion of it is I would like to see a draft of whatever recommendations that you're going forward with right now. Rather than holding off for a period of time, I would like to review what you have come to conclusion so far.
I cannot speak from what Mr. Averson might have presented to you before. I can only go by what he presented to us in the past meeting. That past meeting, unfortunately for me, in my knowledge of it, it's not what you heard from him, but what he told us, and what he told us at that point in time was that, just for me, this was more of a news from his investigation from when he just went into the building recently to let the light go on.
Yes. It's not what I heard. He gave a formal presentation of what the needs were for stabilization. And he gave cost estimates for going forward with that. And in fact, the board approved going forward, I think it was $17,000 additional for stabilization work.
What the extension is asking for, it's not to just ask for a proposal to spend more money. He actually said he was going to try and get a structural engineer out to take a look at it. So that would be pertinent data that I think the Board of Trustees would like to know. Is this building viable to go forward and even stabilize? Because it may be a mute decision based on the whole task force in the 90 days. If it's not, if there's so much structural damage that we cannot rehabilitate the building.
But at the end, it sounds like at the end of it, we're not going to know that. All we're going to have is an estimate for an estimate.
Correct.
That's what it sounds like.
he's asking for an estimate, but he also asked, and correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, but he asked for the 2 weeks because he was going to try to get his guy out there
Correct.
to take a look at further look.
That's the question I asked at the beginning. Let me ask it again because I'm still a little confused. What I thought I heard, and I thought Allison confirmed, was that we would have from one or two of these colleague engineers merely an estimate of what they, for example, putting aside the procurement process, what they would require to come back and do a bona fide estimate as to what it would cost to estimate the cash. So I'm making a number. They say, looking at the size of this project, if I didn't know what it really was, for $5,000, I can now go and do an engineering study that will take me X days and come back to you with that so you can know as a community what you want to do. So we only have the first step of it, their proposal for what is the question. So my thing is we only have their proposal for what it would take for them.
Actually, what you would end up having is that we didn't want to authorize them to proceed without having an idea what the cost would be to do this estimate. So actually, you know what they have to do a structural report analysis. As a architect and as an engineer, they will not provide for the total cost. What they feel that they should be doing is coming out and doing an analysis of the building and basically putting together a scope of work that will then go to somebody else to get those costs.
I understand that what you're saying.
That won't happen until most likely after this group has been disbanded. What we will have before then is a completed report that will tell us what the condition of the building is. As an engineer and as an architect, he could make a rough determination about whether or not the building is sound enough to go forward with any type of further rehabilitation. Not necessarily coming up with the cost for it, but possibly the cost to stabilize the building so that it can go further. The issue was when he went into the building recently, now the lights are on and now they're finishing up the current stabilization, and they cleaned everything out. He got down to the basement level and saw that there was a lot more damage to some of the structural members than he had ever thought about. So he felt that his 1999 report, which he had to do, was no longer valid. That it was beyond the scope of that report. And that we could not rely on that report in order to make a decision as to what the uses for this building are. Yes, we can come out to you and we can present to you a list of uses and ideas and things to go forward with the building. But we felt as a group that presenting you a list of ideas, and if you decide to run with any of those that were positive for the use of the building, that we were being negligent in our responsibility by saying, go ahead and rehabilitate this building when we would find out once that started that it could not happen.
Sure.
So the idea and the intention was to get an extension, to get the engineers into the building, to have that paid for and get an analysis of the structural stability of the building. At that point in time, we can determine whether anything else can go forward. Yes, the reports we have can be presented if the building can be stabilized, but we may come back at the end of that report and only have one decision that can be made for that building.
Okay. Can I ask? Sure.
Let me ask one last question. Is he scheduled, has he committed himself to coming back in 2 weeks, or is this just open-ended, and then you'll come back in another 60 days, another 30 days, and say, he couldn't get into the building. Have you scheduled him for the next week or next 2 weeks? And I can rest assured that at the very least, that these engineers are going to have a look-see at this building within the next 14 days.
When we left the meeting, we had planned to get him back out there. He was contacting his engineers. He was going to try to get them all together, and that was what the goal is. So we know right now that he is contacting his engineers. He's getting them together. He's going to put together what he thinks the cost is so we can proceed with it of doing his structural analysis.
I have another question. You had brought up that he had prepared an analysis 4 months ago, so that's really relatively current. Is that something that we can build upon or use? If, an analysis was done and paid, $17,000 for that amount?
No, he had what was remaining in stabilization. He had additional work that needed to be done, such as pointing up some of the stonework.
Okay.
Or fixing some columns in the basement.
I thought the additional work was limited to 3 categories. One was clearing brush, which DPW did. The second was,